long period of time. So, Mr. Speaker, I will tell you that I strongly support this measure. As everyone has said, it's far from perfect, but I strongly support it, and I urge my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans alike, to join together in support of it. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Chairman reserves the balance of his time. Gentlelady from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After a months-long standoff over raising the debt ceiling, Congress is now forced to take action on a bill that, by all accounts, is deeply flawed. I think everybody today has agreed with that. Why are we doing a flawed bill? Because we waited till the last minute. Instead of reducing the nation's debt by closing tax loopholes for oil companies and private jet owners, today's bill instead creates a super committee that will decide how to take over $1 trillion in cuts. Now, this super committee will serve as a mock Congress, leaving 523 members of Congress sitting on the sidelines while a group of 12 decide the shape of the country for a decade to come. Paying our debt should be a no-brainer. Indeed, the debt ceiling itself is an antiquated solution to a problem we no longer face and should be eliminated. It was originally created to pay for World War I to provide our country with economic stability while at war. Today, we are again in the midst of war, but instead of protecting the stability of our economy, some in Congress have decided to question the necessity of paying our bills. As we all know by now, they've taken our economy hostage and demanded draconian cuts in exchange for not leading our nation into default. The actions have caused real and significant damage. Roll call reports that because of the prolonged debt ceiling crisis, the interest rate the United States government must pay has already increased, which means the interest rates for car loans and home mortgages are also increasing. The stock market has responded as expected. According to the deal book, as of July 29th, big banks and companies withdrew $37.5 billion from money market funds that are described as a key artery for our economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost nearly 5% of its value last week, which meant 401ks, pension plans, retirement plans of all of Americans were put at risk and much of it lost. Baby boomers across the United States watched nervously as all those things were happening. As I mentioned earlier, this type of crisis has become the new normal in this Congress. Under the Republican rule, the House of Representatives has repeatedly led our country to the brink of unthinkable situations. First, we led the country to the brink of a government shutdown, threatening the jobs of hundreds of thousands of workers and endangering vital government services relied upon by Americans every day. As we speak, the Federal Aviation Administration is shuttered, costing the United States government hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue because the majority refuses to pass a clean legislation that does not include measures that threaten rural communities and the future of the airline unions. Now the majority has brought us to the edge of a cliff in order to see how much they can get for not throwing the country into default. In January, Speaker Boehner promised the American people the debt ceiling debate would be an example of a, quote, adult moment, end quote, in Washington. Is this what he had in mind? Just this morning, my colleague on the Rules Committee, Mr. Dreyer, went on National Public Radio to say his party has, quote, not threatened to torpedo the economy by defaulting, end quote. This statement defies reality. We've been brought to this point precisely because the leadership in his party walked out of negotiations, demanded they get ideologically driven cuts before they will vote to protect the stability of our economy. Last but certainly not least, the crisis of the last few months has come at the expense of addressing the true crisis in our country, the jobs crisis that is facing millions of our fellow citizens. Last month, only 25 million Americans failed to find full-time work. Many have been out of work for so long that their unemployment benefits have expired as their skills erode, and they are living on savings or charity from loved ones and friends. In response, we have not introduced a single bill in this House designed to invest significant government resources into creating jobs. Instead, we have repeatedly proposed cutting funding to investments in green technology, in transportation and infrastructure, destroying the promise of putting thousands of Americans back to work in the jobs that can't be outsourced overseas. They've refused to extend unemployment benefits for those who can't find jobs and are moving nowhere fast to extend a payroll tax break that has helped to create the small number of jobs that we added in recent months. Mr. Speaker, it's time that seriously responsibilities are taken here, the responsibilities of leadership, and in doing so put an end to this self-inflicted crisis and focus on getting Americans back to work. I yield back the balance. No, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to express my appreciation to my colleague for her great spirit of bipartisanship. With that, I'd like to yield a minute and a half to my good friend from Staten Island, Mr. Grimm.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Speaker. I rise today to ensure that the voices of those that I represent in Staten Island and Brooklyn are heard. And what they have to say is actually quite simple. They expect of us to use common sense, to bring solutions to the problems that this nation faces. And the problem that we face is not a debt ceiling problem. It's a debt problem. And the people in Staten Island and Brooklyn, every day, they go home and they have to figure out how to manage their household. They go to work and they have to figure out how to manage their small businesses. And they do that with common sense. That's what they ask of us. You cannot spend money you don't have. You cannot continue to rack up debt with no plan to pay it off. Today, this debate is about moving America forward together in a bipartisan way, because this is not a Democratic debt or a Republican debt. It's an American debt, which means that Americans must come together to solve the problems. Today is about solving problems. So I proudly stand here to say that I will support this bill, I will support Speaker Boehner, and I will bring solutions to the problem, not just bickering. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts seeks to control the time of the gentlelady from New York.
I do.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, we have never cut our way out of an economic recession. We've always grown our way out. But we've never grown our way out by investing less than 15% of our GDP in our people's potential. In fact, the last time we cut back on the way we're about to do today was in 1937, and it sent us right back into an economic depression. But this time we're not going to have World War II to rescue our economy. It's interesting to note that the federal investment in home ownership and higher education for our returning GIs and the subsequent infrastructure investments in interstate highway system and the like created a permanent middle class after the war that lasted for 2 generations. But the middle class has never been more threatened than it is today. And this will consign it to stay in the same condition that we find it today. And it's not because we're a poor country. Our largest corporations are experiencing record profits. The top 25 hedge fund managers are making more than $1 billion a year. Our corporations are sitting on more than $2 trillion of cash. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the point is, I understand that this train is leaving the station, but it's going in the wrong direction. We need to be investing in this country, not taking away the resources that will enable it to grow, and for the poor and especially those striving to be in the middle class, to achieve the middle class through education, training, and infrastructure investment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, this time I'm going to yield a minute to my very good friend from Ashland, Wisconsin, Mr. Duffy.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've had a chance to watch this floor debate over the last week or so, and to say the least, I think we could say tempers have flared. There's been a lot of rhetoric on both sides. And as we come together today with a proposal that has been negotiated with both sides, with Speaker Boehner, the President, Harry Reid, it's a deal that not everyone is pleased with. It's a deal that doesn't have in everything that I want, and I'm sure it doesn't have everything in the deal that my friends across the aisle would want. And that's why I think so many of us are hearing from our constituents, a lot on the far right and a lot on the far left, saying we don't like it. But the bottom line is I think this is one of the great moments of the House, where two sides come together and figure out how they are going to find a solution that doesn't work for their parties. It's a solution that works for the American people. And at this point in our history, we owe, what, $14.5 trillion.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield my time an additional 15 seconds.
$14.5 trillion. It's about time this Congress come together and figure out a way to live within our means. This bill is going to start that process, though it doesn't go far enough. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fattah.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise in support of this proposal. But as with many of our greatest capers in history, this is an inside job. I want to offer just in evidence that, you know, we had, in the words of the Treasury Secretary for Reagan and for Bush, an admittance that they were running up deficits and that there was one of the ways to starve the government. And then we had the Republican Party at the height of its power, at the presidency, the House, the Senate, saying, no, we weren't going to have any tax increases, even though we're running up these high deficits. We're going to cut taxes. We're going to hemorrhage trillions of dollars in revenue, and we're going to go into 2 wars. We're going to put a $7 trillion prescription drug plan on the financial pile of our debt. And so Alan Greenspan testified before the Congress in the first weeks of the Bush administration. He said Bush could leave office with our country being entirely debt-free. What happened in the reverse was he doubled the debt, walked out with 8 million Americans losing their jobs.
Gentleman's time has expired.
But as Solomon, in his wisdom, said to those who wanted to cut the baby in half, we choose not to default, but to agree to this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This time I'm happy to yield 2 minutes to, as I've said, the next governor of Indiana, my good friend from Columbus.
Gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. This is a challenging time in the life of our country. Our economy is struggling. Millions are out of work. And now, with a more than $14 trillion national debt, America is on the verge of having its debts exceed our statutory borrowing limit. Now, I recognize if you owe debts, pay debts. Congress has an obligation to defend the full faith and credit of the United States. But this Congress also has an obligation to keep faith with this and future generations of Americans by restoring fiscal responsibility and discipline to our national treasury. The Bipartisan Budget Control Act that we will consider today will make it possible for the nation's bills to be paid with no new taxes, dollar-for-dollar cuts in spending for every increase in the debt ceiling, and it will give the American people a fighting chance to consider a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. Now, let me be clear. The Budget Control Act is not so much a good deal as it is a good start. I really believe this bipartisan compromise is a modest but meaningful step in the direction of fiscal discipline and reform, and I welcome it. Now, while this bill doesn't go nearly far enough, it does move us in the right direction. You know, leadership means knowing when to say yes and knowing when to say no. I believe the time has come to get something done so this Congress can move our national government back in the direction of fiscal responsibility and reform and begin to advance policies that will put Americans back to work. Last thought. There's a lot of credit taking on a day like today, a lot of bipartisanship, back patting, as we say. But let me say from my heart, this day where we see the ship of state turning ever so slightly toward that lodestar of fiscal responsibility, this day does not belong so much to any one political leader, to any one political party, or to any one branch of government. This day belongs to the American people.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Who have stood, who have clamored, who have come to town halls, who have demanded this government live within their means and said enough is enough. This is your day.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, 1 minute.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the House of Representatives, this, of course, is a very important day, momentous decision, difficult decision for all of us. I'm going to vote for this in the best interest of our country and putting us in the stature where we need to be. But I do want to point out one area of weakness that we're going to have to look at very carefully as we go forward, and that is in the application of this 12-member committee, and especially as it relates to the areas of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now, my understanding is, and I think this is understanding that we certainly need to make clear, that Social Security and Medicaid, veterans, Pell Grants are all protected fully under this bill. But when it comes to Medicare, my understanding is that there will be an opportunity in here where they will look at Medicare on the provider side. Question becomes, how can you basically separate benefits of Medicare patients when you have the patient, the doctors, and the hospital, and you can't adequately separate that? So I just say we must be very mindful of the Medicare apparatus here.
Gentleman from California.
Speaker, may I reserve the balance of my time?
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Speaker, I yield myself 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I did not come to Washington to dismantle the New Deal or the Great Society. And I did not come to Washington to force more people into poverty. I agree that we need to avoid default and to confront our long-term fiscal challenges. That's why on Saturday I voted in support of the Reid proposal, which would have reduced our debt by hundreds of billions of dollars. But the bill before us today is unfair in so many ways. It disproportionately places the burden of dealing with our debt issue on the backs of those who can least afford it, while it spares the wealthiest from contributing anything. There is something fundamentally wrong when a billionaire hedge fund manager pays a lower tax rate than his secretary, when big oil can make tens of billions in profits every quarter but still get sweetheart deals from the taxpayer, and when we are slashing funding for roads and bridges but allowing tax breaks for corporate jet owners to continue. And there are no new revenues in the bill before us today, only massive cuts in what is called domestic discretionary spending. But what does that actually mean? It means less investment in our transportation and infrastructure. It means less investment in medical research and education and food security. To put it simply, it means less jobs and higher unemployment at a time when millions of Americans are struggling to find work. And despite the rhetoric of its supporters, the bill puts Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid on the chopping block. We all know how we got into this mess. 2 huge tax cuts, mostly for the wealthy, that weren't paid for. 2 wars that weren't paid for, a massive prescription drug bill that wasn't paid for. Now, there are certainly places to cut. Right now, we are borrowing $10 billion every single month, $10 billion every single month for military operations in Afghanistan to prop up a corrupt and incompetent Karzai regime. But according to the Congressional Budget Office, the spending caps contained in this legislation do not apply to ending that misguided war. That makes no sense to me. The truth is that the best way to deal with our long-term fiscal situation is to grow our economy. That means creating jobs and putting people back to work. This bill goes exactly in the wrong direction. I have 2 children, Mr. Speaker, who I love more than anything, and I don't want them to grow up in a country where the gap between the very rich and poor grows wider and wider each year. We can do better, Mr. Speaker. We must do better. And we can do so in a way that does not abandon the principles of economic justice and fairness that have made our nation so great. I will vote no on this bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California.
Speaker, I give myself 1 minute to say to my good friend, Rules Committee colleague, that time and time again he criticizes the tax cuts that have been put into place. They really are the Bush-Obama tax cuts, because we all know last December President Obama signed an extension of those. But I think it's important for us to look at the '03 revenue flow and look at what happened just a few short years later in 2007. In 2003, Mr. Speaker, we had $1,562 billion in $1,782 billion in revenues to the federal treasury. In 2007, after those tax cuts went into place, we had $2,567 billion in revenues. That was a $785 billion increase, a 44% increase in the take that the federal government had because of the implementation of those cuts. It's important to recognize that if we can grow the economy, we can generate an increase in the flow of revenues to the federal treasury. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield a minute and a half to my good friend from Bainbridge Township, Ohio, Mr. LaTourette.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for how long?
Minute and a half.
1.5 minutes.
I thank the chairman, and Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the recognition. This moment in time on the floor reminds me exactly of a period during the 1990s. You know, there's a lot of publicity given to the new freshman class, and we from the revolutionary class of 1994 are feeling a little neglected these days. But welfare reform was the discussion, and we endured overheated rhetoric on this floor about how our proposals were mean to pregnant women and children and old people and young people and poor people, until one day the President of the United States, President Clinton, decided that he wasn't going to be the protector of overheated rhetoric. He was going to be the President of the United States. And he signed the welfare reform bill. And I happened to walk onto the floor, and you would have thought that my friends who were here on the other side of the aisle at that time, that their dogs had all died because they looked so depressed. But the fact of the matter is that President Clinton decided to leave. Now, I don't know what's going on in all of the other offices, but we've taken a lot of phone calls over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and some people call in and tell me hold the line. Some people call in and tell me I'm an idiot. But the overwhelming sentiment of the calls is, you guys got to work this out. And so to the President of the United States' credit, Barack Obama, he had the Speaker, Mr. Boehner, the Minority Leader, Mrs. Pelosi, the Vice President, Senator Reid, Senator McConnell down to the White House, and they worked this out. And I don't think I'm going to stand here and listen to this continued harangue about how we are being mean to people, because I don't think anybody on that side of the aisle believes that President Barack Obama would do the horrible things that the people are indicating he would do. I just don't believe it. And I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield myself 10 seconds. Mr. Speaker, I hear a lot about the Bush tax cuts, but if they were so great, where are the jobs? I just think it's simply wrong to have the middle class in this country bear the burden of balancing the budget when the Donald Trumps of the world get their tax cuts protected. There's something inherently wrong about that. At this point, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlewoman from Texas, recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman from Massachusetts. Mr. Speaker, this is a very tough place to put America, not members of Congress. We are paid to come here and do our job, but it's a very tough place to put America. And so I have a simple state of facts to present today, and listen to my other colleagues, which I will, because it is a tough decision to, in actuality, support legislation that seems to be driven by thoughts that the only way to get something done is a whole country hostage and a whole Congress hostage. That is simply what we have. On the brink of August 2nd, we're now throwing something on the floor that is arguably supposed to be helpful. I am concerned that there are nuances in this legislation that will hurt people that we all care about. But it's a tough decision not to say yes to having America pay her bills. I hope for once that once we get past today, that we will not in any way yield again to the voices of 87 members who care nothing about America. They simply care about their way or the highway. I am upset, and we should not do this anymore.
Thank you very much.
It is time for real adults to control this Congress, and they need to control this Congress now.
Well, I thought I was recognized, Mr. Speaker.
Chair will advise all members to respect the gavel. The gentlewoman was out of order. Gentleman from California.
I thought I was recognized. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'm happy to yield a minute and a half to my good friend from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, Mr. Whitfield.
Thank you very much. And I rise in support of this legislation. And I think that President Obama, the leaders in the House and the Senate, should be given a warm congratulations on being able to come to some agreement to prevent America from defaulting on its debt. We all know that this is not a perfect piece of legislation, but one of the real positives of this legislation is the joint commission that's going to be established
by 6 members from the House, 6 members from the Senate that will come up for recommendations to reduce federal spending. And we do know that exempt from that is Social Security, veterans benefits, as well as Medicaid, those who really need health care the most. But I've heard a lot of discussion today about this is not about jobs. And I would just point out that getting our financial house in order is very important. But we all recognize, if you've read any newspaper recently, you will find out that in this administration, the excess of regulations coming out, particularly from EPA, has been a real hindrance to job creation in America. And not only that, but the health care bill that was adopted last year because of the uncertainty. So this is an important first step on getting our financial house in order. Now next we need to start working on removing uncertainty on the regulatory side of the government. And so I would urge everyone to support this legislation.
The gentleman's time has expired. The Chair would advise that the gentleman from Massachusetts has 3 minutes remaining. The gentleman from California has 2 3/4 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, we have one final speaker, so if the gentleman has others, you're good. All right. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We have missed, in my opinion, a wonderful opportunity, an opportunity to make a grand bargain, as the Speaker wanted to do, as Leader Pelosi wanted to do, as Leader Reid wanted to do, as the President wanted to do, and as the Vice President wanted to do. For months now, the world has looked to America and asked whether we were still a nation that paid its bills, or whether, thanks to the ideological intransigence of a few, we would do the unthinkable and default on our obligations. We are a more responsible and honorable nation than that. We are only at this point because the far right wing, for the first time in American history, has chosen to hold our economy hostage in order to enact a radical ideological agenda far out of step with the majority of Americans. If nothing else, these months have shown the American people who puts our country's welfare first and who would rather have ideological purity at all costs. I am voting for this bill, not because I like this bill, although it does do some things that I think need to be done. We need to bring down the deficit. We need to address the debt. We need to return to fiscal responsibility. But default for the United States of America is not an option. This would affect all of the people that I represent and all the people of this country if we defaulted. At the very least, this bill averts that outcome by paying our bills through 2013, which will bring certainty to a struggling economy that badly needs it. This bill cuts spending by $1.2 trillion and also establishes a process to arrive at additional spending cuts. The second set of deficit reductions will be entrusted to a bipartisan committee. Hopefully, that committee will accurately reflect the priorities of this nation. We are here because we missed, as I said, a great opportunity. May I have one additional minute?
The gentleman from Maryland.
The chance to pass now a truly balanced agreement that relies on both spending cuts and revenue. We're not there. But I have said many times during the course of this debate, to govern is to compromise, not to sell out, as some people think on this floor, that voting for a compromise is somehow a sellout. We cannot run America on that theory, and that is not what democracy is all about. I urge my colleagues to ensure that America, in fact, pays its bills, that America...
Yield, and I'll yield my friend additional time if he'd like.
I'll be glad to yield.
I thank my friend for yielding, and I'd just like to compliment him. I'm pointing to compromise. I don't know if he heard, I closed the rule debate by talking about the Connecticut Compromise, which established a bicameral legislature July 16, 1787. In my closing remarks here, it was called the Great Compromise. And my friend is absolutely right. We're at that point today in dealing with an issue not of that magnitude, but clearly a very important one. And I'm happy to yield my friend an additional 10 seconds.
How about
15.
Minute? 1 minute?
15 seconds.
1 minute.
Well, Mr. McGovern can...
No, I yielded to you,
Gentleman's
David.
time from Massachusetts has expired.
Oh, his time has expired. I'll yield 45 seconds to my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have said numerous times during the course of this debate about whether America was going to pay its bills that we need to vote not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans. Americans concerned about the fiscal posture of their country, concerned about the confidence that people around the world have in the American dollar, which is, after all, the standard of the world. That is what I think this vote is about. It should not be about partisan politics, and very frankly, it should not be about ideological extremes. It ought to be about responsibility. It ought to be understanding our oath of office is to preserve and protect the United States of America. This bill does that. Vote yes.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California has 2 minutes remaining. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I feel very honored to follow my good friend and classmate, the distinguished Democratic whip, as we talk about this compromise and where we are. Now, Mr. Speaker, saving Social Security and Medicare is a priority that I believe both political parties share. Contrary to much of what has been put out there, this is something that is addressed in this measure. We're going to be able to save Social Security and Medicare, again, working together in a bipartisan way. Creating jobs. Democrats and Republicans alike talk about that. How is it that we're going to be able to do that? Getting our fiscal house in order is a very, very important step in our quest to ensure that the people who are hurting and looking for jobs will have an opportunity to get them. Sending a positive signal to the global market that we are the world's economic, military, and geopolitical leader. By increasing the debt ceiling, we are sending a positive signal that we are going to continue meeting our obligations and our responsibility. But at the same time, dramatically reducing spending. The problem that has gotten us to this point is what we're doing for the first time ever. After 75 times increasing the debt ceiling, we're finally getting to the root cause, and the problem, as has been said over and over again, is our debt, and we're going to turn the corner on that in a thoughtful and balanced way. Mr. Speaker, I want to compliment the President of the United States. I want to compliment the two leaders of the United States Senate, Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell, and I want to congratulate Speaker John Boehner, who has done an absolutely phenomenal job ensuring that we wouldn't continue business as usual. And I also want to congratulate Minority Leader Pelosi for her effort that she's put into getting us to the point where we are today. And so, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and with that I yield back the balance of my time.
Back the balance of his time. Chair now recognizes members from the Committee on Ways and Means. Chairman, Mr. Camp from Michigan, and the ranking minority member, Mr. Levin from Michigan. Gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, if the Congress does not act, and act now, America will default. And that would wreak havoc on our economy and make it harder for Americans to find and keep a job in an already weak economy. Default cannot be an option, and I'm pleased that the bill before us ensures that will not occur. Just as default would threaten the economic health of this country, so would increasing taxes. Raising taxes on families and job creators would hinder investment, increase the cost of doing business, and result in even less hiring and fewer jobs. That's the wrong direction when we're struggling with an unemployment rate of 9.2% and 14 million Americans looking for work. The good news is that the legislation before us recognizes these basic facts. It avoids a default, it makes sure the government pays our bills, and it does not increase taxes. And though some have argued the new Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction could pave the way for tax increases, that is not going to happen. The committee's structure, the baseline it will work off of, and the fact that Republicans are in the majority in the House virtually guarantees that tax rates will not go up. Furthermore, this legislation finally forces Washington to make serious changes to the way it spends taxpayer dollars. There are real budget reforms. There is a path to a balanced budget amendment, and there are automatic spending cuts if Congress does not rein in spending on its own. I applaud the efforts of all those who helped craft this agreement, especially Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor. I urge my colleagues to recognize this opportunity to fix what is broken in Washington and use this occasion to significantly cut runaway spending. Mr. Speaker, I urge a yes vote, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you. I now yield 2 minutes to my friend, a most distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee for a long time, Mr. Charles Rangel of New York.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I stand on this floor as an American and a person that loves this Congress so much. And I'm embarrassed also as a member that a President of the United States would have his domestic and foreign policy actually held hostage, because with him and only him and no other president have we decided that we would almost put in jeopardy the faith and the fiscal responsibility of this country paying its debts. You know, a lot of people have said that we got to a $14.4 trillion debt because we got drunk and spent money like a drunken sailor. If that is so, the people having the hangover certainly aren't the wealthy people in this country. And this decision was decided without any consideration of the people that are longing for jobs in our great country. If the Republicans had to hold the president hostage, I wish that they would have held him hostage on the questions that my constituents wake up in the morning and ask. Not whether or not the debt ceiling has been risen, but how can I get a job? How can I really get back my dignity? How can I put food on the table? These are issues that you certainly don't resolve by cutting spending, causing people to lose their jobs and to lose their hope. So, indeed, I'm glad that we're not going to default. But the days ahead, we ought to be spending some time talking about what most Americans want, and that is a fair tax system where the wealthy have gained so much during this spree that we've had and not allowed a hangover to be with the people that are jobless. We still have time to close this responsibility that we have, to close the debt that we have, not by laying off people, not by just cutting programs during the recession, but by thinking how we can train people, how we can research, and how we can get our people back to work.
Gentleman's time is expired. Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Reed.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. $14.4 trillion. $1.6 trillion every year added on to that national debt. The people in November 2010 spoke loudly. We are listening. It is time that we in this chamber accept the fact that D.C. has to and will change, because the American people have spoken loudly. They want us to get our fiscal house in order. They want us to bring certainty to the American market so that we can invest in this great country again and put people back to work, not only for this generation, but for generations to come. I rise in support of this legislation. It is not the cure-all. It is not the one battle that will win this war on our national debt. But it opens us up on a path to where we need to be firmly dedicated and disciplined to carry on this battle and the battles to come. So I ask all my colleagues, let us govern responsibly. Let us avoid default, but continue on this battle, and continue on we will as a new class, as a freshman member of this great chamber. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan.
I now yield a minute and a half to another distinguished member of our committee, Mr. Kind of Wisconsin.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this agreement. But this is a lousy way to run our great country or to rebuild a world-class economy. I support it because the alternative is unacceptable. Defaulting on our nation's obligations for the first time in our nation's history. Doing so would be the greatest unforced error ever committed in the history of our country. And it's all political. The performance of this Congress the last couple of months has a lot to be desired. And if King Solomon were alive today, I think his metaphorical solution to all this would be to kill both women and spare the child. But if we are to achieve true fiscal solvency for our country, there are three things I think that need to happen. We need to invest in our future, grow the economy. You do that by investing in education and job training, in scientific research, in the infrastructure upgrade our nation needs, in broadband expansion. That's not happening right now, and it won't, I fear, under this agreement. We need to also look for smart savings in the budget, starting with changing the way we pay for health care in this country so it's based on the value and no longer the volume of care that's given. By getting rid of outdated weapons programs that the Pentagon keeps telling Congress, stop appropriating money for this, because they're not asking for it, and they don't need it. It's ending taxpayer subsidies going to large agribusinesses with mailing addresses in New York, Chicago, and in San Francisco, not even to working families. And finally, we need tax reform to simplify a code that's act like an anchor on economic growth and job creation, but it is fair, asking the most wealthy to contribute their fair share as well. I support the agreement. I encourage my colleagues to do so as well. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
A minute. I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Collins.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have voted twice to raise the debt ceiling. In May, I voted with about 90 other people for a clear debt ceiling raise. I voted this past weekend for Leader Reid's program, which had cuts. But I can't vote for this program because the first series of cuts we know, the second series of cuts we don't know. I fear it's a Trojan horse. And if you look inside that Trojan horse, it's Scylla and Charybdis inside, the whirlpools and the shoals. And that's an odyssey and journey that this country should not have to traverse. This country has been taken to this point by a group of ideologues that don't like government, want to reduce it, are reducing it, want to hurt employment figures to hurt the President of the United States, Mr. Speaker, and I don't want to hurt him. Justice Louis Brandeis said the greatest dangers to liberty lurk in insidious encroachment by men of zeal, well-meaning, but without understanding. Justice Brandeis is with us today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan.
At this time, Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, it's important we know, as we try to change this government, that we're actually making changes in the direction it's going. Without the Budget Control Act, our government will be over 23% of the size of our economy by the end of this decade. The Budget Control Act changes that. By the end of the decade, it will be about 21.5% of the size of our economy. It is comparable, coming close, to the shrinkage of the economy under President Reagan in his 8 years in the White House. Truth of the matter is, this doesn't go far enough for conservatives. You can't cut far enough or soon enough for members of Congress like myself, because we just believe this country is so deep, so dangerously deep in debt. But with this vote today, tonight we cut out the same amount of spending the President put in this government in that ill-fated, failed stimulus bill. And later this year, we get a chance to vote another cut in this government equivalent to the size of Obamacare. So we start with 2 strong cuts, reversing and shrinking the size of government. In this bill, we achieve 2/3 of the discretionary cuts included in the Ryan budget in the path to prosperity that Republican House members believe in. Now, a few months ago, if someone said the Senate passed a budget and they've agreed to 2/3 of your cuts discretionary, we would have celebrated. We're not celebrating today because we know there's so much more work to be done. But we know also that this cut spending today. It puts controls on future Congresses in the way they spend. That's important. And holds Congress and the White House both accountable for getting the size of this government back in control without increasing taxes on families like you, on our job creators back home along Main Street.
Yield an additional 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Speaker. And it does so today. I support this bill as a first step, anxious to get to more spending and savings and getting this wasteful, bloated government down to size. And I know, too, any vote, my principle is on tax cuts and spending cuts. If I can change the direction of this country with bigger spending cuts, my vote will be a yes. I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
Mr. Camp, I just want to ask my colleague from Michigan, are you ready to close?
Yes, I'm prepared to close.
I yield myself the balance of our time.
Gentleman has 3 minutes remaining.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend.
Oh, without objection.
Thank you. The Republicans in this House have taken this nation to a dangerous and unnecessary brink. I definitely do not want our nation to default on its full faith and credit. But I also don't want our nation to default on our solemn obligations as a nation, as a community, to all of our citizens. That's why we need a balanced approach to keep us on an even keel as we move ahead. This means savings and revenues. I repeat, this means savings and revenues. So as I vote today, as the ranking member on the Ways and Means Committee, I will keep in mind how we must not let down our citizens who need programs. One example, unemployment insurance. It's set to expire at the end of this year as millions desperately look for work. And I just now have received a report that this year's extension, the next year's extension, would cost $45 billion. We need to get those resources. If we're not on a balanced path, we will not be able to address critical needs of our fellow and sister citizens, such as unemployment insurance. We need balance to be true to ourselves. I now yield the balance of my time to the Budget Committee.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the
Excuse me, Mr. Kemp, I think it takes unanimous consent to do that.
Time
to the Budget Committee. I'm sorry, Mr. Kemp.
Objection, so ordered. Gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility, or Debt Commission, we received testimony from experts in economic policy research, and they said that when debt loads of a country reach above or at 90% of their economy or GDP, that results in the reduction in economic growth in that country by about 1 percentage point. And using the administration's economic model, that 1 percentage point increase in our GDP or decrease in our GDP costs about 1 million jobs. That's why this debate is so important. It is so important to get us on a path to fiscal responsibility, to begin to bring down our national debt. The plan before us today does that. It does that with spending reductions. It does it with the sort of structural reforms in terms of spending caps that are there. And it also it does it with an automatic reduction in spending. If for some reason Congress, this select committee that is set up in this bill, fails to come to some sort of agreement on how to reduce spending, that automatic reduction, I think, is an important backstop so that the select committee will take its work seriously and do everything to come to a bipartisan solution. Also, there's a path forward on a balanced budget amendment in this legislation. That is absolutely critical, I think, for not just today, because we know it is impossible to bind future Congresses, but to put in place a structure and a mechanism well into the future so that we don't find ourselves continuing to deal with the fundamentals of this problem, that we begin to deal with the problem, we make progress on the problem, and that progress will mean job creation. And obviously that's something we're all looking forward to. I thank the Speaker and urge a yes vote on this legislation.
Gentleman's time has expired. The Chair now recognizes the members of the Budget Committee, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Ryan, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Van Hollen.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask how much time is remaining on both sides?
The gentleman from Wisconsin has 7 1/2 minutes. The gentleman from Maryland has 8 1/2 minutes.
At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 1/2 minutes to a member of the Budget Committee, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 3 1/2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to tell you, I'd love for people to be able to come to Oklahoma City anytime they have the opportunity to be able to do that. But to be able to talk to the great folks in my district, I can tell you the one thing that comes up again and again is they are really frustrated. And they're looking for things to really be able to change here in Washington. They see how broken our system is. They see the way that we interact. They are really legitimately frustrated, and I can tell you they have lost trust in what we're doing and how we're doing it. We, quite frankly, as a federal government, we're trying to do too many things, and we can't afford all the things that we're doing. So in some very simple way, this whole process has united the nation to be able to look simply at $14.3 trillion in debt and to say, as a nation, we have a problem. That is a good first step. Now, for the conversation that's been happening around Congress over the past several months now, is now dealing with how do we resolve the problem and what is the core of the problem. Is the problem the debt ceiling vote? Is the problem tomorrow? Or is the problem $14 trillion in debt? And I feel like sometimes we've been trying to either figure out how to get past tomorrow or how to get past solving this issue of $14.3 trillion in debt. That has created 7 months of debate and 7 months of conversation that I fear has made an unrealistic expectation of how much we can really do in one piece of legislation. Quite frankly, no piece of legislation can solve $14.3 trillion in debt all in one moment. No piece of legislation can be a perfect solution. There is no perfect, ideal piece of legislation that's going to solve it all. Are there major issues, I think, that are in every piece of legislation? I'm sure there are in every one of them. But in this one, I would look at it and I would say it's not perfect, but it takes us down that first step to start getting out of this. If there's a perception that we can solve it all in one piece, I think everyone's underestimated the size and the scope of what it really means to deal with this large of a debt and this large of a deficit. It is a single step on a very long journey. Does it solve all the problem? No. Does it cure cancer? No. Does it get us out of all the wars? No. Does it locate Amelia Earhart's body? No. Does it find the Ark of the Covenant? No. It doesn't solve everything we'd like to do with it, but it does begin to put a framework around the federal government for the next 10 years to set spending caps in place to say we're going to stop the growth of government. We've grown very quickly, very fast. We've got to first stop that growth of government and put some boundaries around that. That's a good first step on that. It puts a square focus on a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, which 80% of the American people say they want some version of the balanced budget amendment. Quite frankly, it creates a moment for Republicans and Democrats to be able to have an honest conversation about what should that text be for a balanced budget amendment. How can we work together? The Constitution is not owned by one party. That is owned by the people of the United States of America. So that is both parties coming together to have a very frank conversation about if we're going to have a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, how do we get that done? What is the text of that? And how do we do what is best for our nation? But the key thing of this piece of legislation today is focused on not just getting us past tomorrow, but starting us down a process, that single first step of starting us down a process that in the days ahead our children will not live in the shadow of this kind of debt, of this kind of deficit, and we as a nation can get back to doing the things we love to do rather than worrying about what creditor we're going to pay and which one we're not. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We should never have gotten to the point where our troops in Afghanistan had to ask whether they were going to be paid. That's a scandal. And it's scandalous that our Republican colleagues would threaten for the first time in American history to torpedo America's creditworthiness and American jobs unless they succeeded in enacting a budget plan to end the Medicare guarantee, slash Medicaid, and slash critical investments in education in our future. That was the plan. They wanted to do that now, and they wanted to have this whole debate again 6 months from now. Why? Not to reduce the deficit. If the goal was to reduce the deficit, why refuse to end taxpayer subsidies for the oil companies? If reducing the deficit was the purpose, why refuse to end special breaks for corporate jets and the folks at the very high end of the income scale? That wasn't the plan. The plan was to use this moment to threaten the economy, to try and slash the social safety net and those critical investments in education, innovation in our future. And guess what? They failed. They failed to do that. They failed to end the Medicare guarantee. They failed to slash Medicaid. They failed to slash education. In this measure, we succeeded in protecting Medicare and Social Security beneficiaries. We succeeded in protecting seniors in nursing homes, individuals with disabilities, and poor kids who depend on Medicaid for their health care. And we succeeded in providing room for critical investments in education and America's future. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Speaker. There's much in this plan I don't like. We did not succeed in shutting down special interest tax loopholes that add hundreds of billions of dollars to our deficits. Our Republican colleagues refused to cut those subsidies for big oil companies. They refused to cut the others. And now we're going to have a great debate. We're going to have a great debate about how to grow the economy and reduce our long-term deficit. It will be a debate about our national priorities. I hope we will support the balanced approach that the President has called for. I have very limited time, I'm sorry. One that refuses to put greater burdens on Medicare beneficiaries in order to provide greater tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans. And in the coming months, our Republican colleagues will be given the following test. Will they choose to protect special interest tax breaks over investments necessary to keep our nation strong and secure? Will they finally demonstrate a willingness to pay for our national defense rather than put it on the credit card? Mr. Speaker, let's get on with that big national debate, and let's finally focus on jobs and getting the economy going as we reduce our long-term deficit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Wisconsin. Gentleman from Wisconsin reserve the balance of his time. Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady, a member of the Budget Committee, Ms. Moore.
Gentlelady from Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
And thank you so much for yielding. So many of my colleagues have said that it was necessary to storm the White House and take the country hostage in the name of their grandchildren. So I wanted to go on record talking about what I want for my grandchildren. I want Head Start for my grandchildren. I want WIC programs and early childhood education for my programs. I want my kids to go to a school where they can participate in the science fair. I want immunizations for them. I want research done for food safety to make sure the chicken nuggets are safe. I want clean air and clean water for them. I want jobs where they invent things like new energy sources. And yes, I want them to be contributing citizens and pay taxes. And I want a safety net for them in case they're disabled and when they become elderly. And if they get cold in the cold winters of Wisconsin, that they'll have some energy assistance. I want my grandchildren to get the American dream. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Wisconsin. Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield a minute to the gentlelady from California.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for yielding and also for your very bold and effective leadership, Mr. Van Hollen. I rise in strong opposition to this unbalanced debt ceiling bill. This is an unbalanced approach. We all know that. We've heard that. And furthermore, this debt ceiling bill should have never been an option in terms of having to come to this floor to debate this and to do this. We should have, like Democratic and Republican presidents have done in the past, we should have lifted the debt ceiling. Rightfully so, many of us are concerned about these discretionary cuts. What are these cuts going to do as it relates to our senior citizens, low-income individuals, and the poor? This debt ceiling bill, it does nothing to address the real crises in our country, the lack of jobs and economic growth. At a time when investments are needed to jumpstart our economy and put people back to work, this deal and its cuts-only approach, which it is, it's the wrong approach. It's an outrage that as we stand here today that we could not raise the debt ceiling by voting for that. Thank you again. I intend to vote no on this.